but you have these persistent quote-unquote sins. And these people think that the way they're going to overcome this persistent sin that they're engaging is by prayer, is by reading the Bible. In other words, reactivity. They think that if I do these activities, meaning if I read the Bible, meaning if I pray without ceasing, if I put on the armor of God, I memorize Bible verses, I go and I get an accountability partner, right? These are the same illusions that one thinks they're going to find success in the same way that the parent who thinks, well, if I ground my child enough, if I threaten them enough, they're going to stop having sex. They're going to stop drinking. In other words, threat is going to bring them into accord. And you know as a parent, that is not the way you're going to bring that child into accord. In the same way, you know that externally, reactive thinking is not the way you're going to bring yourself into accord with things that you're struggling with, temptations and so forth you're struggling with. They have to start loving themselves enough to know, if I keep drinking like this, I'm going to really hurt myself. I'm going to form patterns of behavior as a youngster that I'm going to carry all the way into adulthood. And it's the job of the parent to help instill this kind of thinking in the child, because if you place into the child this idea that if I beat you hard enough, if I ground you enough, and I'm not saying physically attack, I'm saying that if I beat into you hard enough, this moral dogma that Christianity demands, if I put enough ultimatum into my child to believe that and make them feel guilty enough, that's going to change them. The behavior's going to stop. And it's not, because when I was in high school, I met my wife when I was in high school. I fell in love with her. I was so attracted to my wife, and we were having sex long before we got married. And so the point is that it doesn't matter what kind of ultimatum. Like if you tell your kid you can't bring alcohol in the house, and if I catch you, you're gonna have it, and so on and so forth, they're just gonna find another way to get it. Sorry, my phone just cut out. They're just gonna find a way to get it. They're going to find a way to get the alcohol. They'll go somewhere else to have sex. They're going to figure out whatever they need to figure out to get to whatever they want, because the heart hasn't been awakened enough for them to love themselves to make a better decision, so that when you're not around, they make a good decision. And see, this all falls into the whole integrity and accountability thing, and that the Christian thinks, I'm going to have integrity if I have an accountability partner. If I got someone that I have to go and tell them all the things that I did, that's going to keep me in line. And see, this is all reactive psychology, because the Christian doesn't trust himself. They don't trust themselves, and so they think, I have to have somebody else hold my feet to the fire. I have to imagine Christ being depressed or disappointed in my behavior, and then that, in other words, shame, is going to bring me into alignment. And we all know, any psychology, if you ever go to any psychologist, they will tell you these are not the appropriate ways that you deal with inappropriate behavior. They'll tell you all day long, 7 days till Sunday, they'll tell you, you cannot bring a person into truth, into appropriate behavior, compassion, and so forth by demand. That has to come from the heart. And how do we get the heart to so motivate us, to so compel us to behave appropriately? How do we do that? We do that through identity, like I mentioned earlier. We see ourselves in others, in the world, in the environment, and this brings along a baseline of compassion, because you know yourself. And because you know yourself, you see yourself in others. This isn't something that someone has to convince you of. This is something that naturally comes out of you as the identity process occurs, as a person identifies more and more so with their true self, with who they are at their core. And so this is why this whole meditation idea is so prevalent in the East. It's because these Eastern considerations realize that it's all within you. And self-identity, knowing who you are, is the way appropriate behavior is going to come flowing out of you like a wellspring. it's not going to come flowing out of you because you make demands on yourself and you should yourself to death. Because shoulding on yourself doesn't do anything. Shoulding on yourself leaves you empty. And this is why after Sunday morning, when Monday comes along and everyone gets into the workplace, shoulding on yourself doesn't work. It doesn't make you behave appropriately. You're going to be just as apt to do the things you shouldn't be doing on Monday as you were Saturday, even though you had Sunday, because the Christian is starting with the point of, I'm empty, I have lack, I can't be trusted. And so I have to seek outside myself in order to should myself enough, shame myself enough, guilt myself enough to doing the right thing. In other words, when you say to yourself, what would Jesus do? This is an elaborate, glorified way of shoulding on yourself. Because when you answer the question, this is what Jesus would do, you say to yourself, well, I should be doing that. And see, this is reactivity. And reactive living leads to pathology. Because you're always trying to be something that you're not. You're always trying to be someone that you're not. And see, you can't think in these terms in Christianity because, again, the person is empty. They're a sinner. They can't be trusted. So an accountability partner is the only way. Okay. Can you see then how this religion brings you into pathology, into a pathological approach to life? Because you're always trying to be something that you're not. You're always trying to be this sinless being that in Christian terms you can't be. Even though you already are perfect, you're not aware of that at all as a Christian because you see yourself as a sinner. So you'll never see yourself as perfect, and so therefore you'll never look within yourself for the answer. You look to Jesus for the answers. You look to the Bible for the answers. You look to your pastor for the answers because they sure as heck ain't going to come from within you. You're a sinner. And right there you can see the contradiction, because what comes out of you when you see someone suffering? Compassion. Compassion comes out of you. And why does compassion come out of you? Because you have everything within yourself. That's why it comes out of you. And because you identify yourself in the other, meaning you see their suffering and you see yourself, you picture yourself, you know, I know what it's like to suffer like that. When I see that cancer patient, I'm like, I know what it's like to feel like you're dying. I know what it's like to look in the mirror and to see your skeleton coming through your skin. I know what it's like to be around other people and you see them. When they see you, they know you have cancer and you know you're bringing this darkness, in a sense, to these others because you feel like you're sick. You feel like you feel like you're so empty. And it's just, it's a negative spiral going downward. And when I had cancer, I could identify with illegitimate feelings like that. This feeling that I'm darkness. You're not darkness when you have cancer. That's a lie you tell yourself. That's what I told myself when I had cancer. And I told myself because the disease causes you to think and behave in nutty ways because you are dying. And you know, it's kind of funny, but it's a similar thing with the Christian. It causes you to behave and think and act in nutty ways because you see yourself as a sinner. You're dead. And without Christ, you don't have life. And so you'll sing songs that say, I'm a wretch. You'll sing songs like that and you'll believe that. That's a nutty idea. Why would you want your child to think that about themselves, think that they're a wretch, think that they're a sinner, when at the same time you're telling them, baby, you got everything you need inside of you. You can be anything you want to be. You have unlimited potential. And so I better trust in God. I better trust in Jesus because I can't trust myself. And so this unlimited potential is hindered by the brain's assumption, klesha. And it doesn't allow the person to see clearly. This is why when I talk about the person who has the lens, the binocular vision that Christianity causes, their life and Christianity will only come to them, life will only come to them in one way, through these binoculars. And it's this binocular vision that the Christian puts upon themselves by calling themselves a sinner. And so everything has to pass through this idea that they're a sinner, and so therefore they need. And this teaches the dependent lifestyle. Fear. And by thinking the world is fallen and thinking that you are fallen, that's fear. And the last thing you want to be instilling in your child is any kind of sense of unrelenting fear. And if you think you're a sinner, and if you think the world is fallen and out to get you, that's fear. And if you're teaching the child they got to put on the armor of God every day, they got to pray without ceasing and so forth, you're driving in the fear. This is an inappropriate approach to life. Thinking that you're sorry, my phone cut out again. Thinking that you're a sinner, thinking that you have to be saved. And you get locked out. You get locked out from this centered, self-according attitude. You get locked out of that life posture because your life posture is you're a sinner and that must be corrected. You can't be trusted, and you're going to spend the rest of your life studying this religion, studying this doctrine, studying this stuff because you can't be trusted. It's not in you. And this is why Eastern philosophies are so repugnant to the Christian. Because it's like, well, they're saying that there isn't this higher being that you answer to, so you're not accountable. And they're saying that it comes from within you. That appropriate behavior is going to come from within you. Well, the Christian's like, well, that doesn't make any sense because I'm a sinner inside. What comes out of me is sin. And see, that's the trap. That's the trap. And that's why I started this thing saying that every Christian is complicit. They're complicit because they instill the trap within themselves. They put themselves in the cage. They lock the key and throw it away because they know they're right. Christianity causes a self-righteous position in life because you've got the spiritual thing figured out. You got it figured out. You got the Trinity, you got the God, you've got God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit. You're a sinner. There's heaven and hell. And if you follow and believe in these ways, you have resolved the problem. And now life is about going out, identifying with Jesus, and behaving appropriately. And the Christian thinks this is the right way to approach life. I've got it figured out. Now if I just follow these rules in this book, because I can't be trusted, I'm going to figure it out. It's meaning Jesus is going to show me the way. I'll figure it out through Jesus showing me the way. And you can see then, this sets a person up for failure because it puts them in a realm of separation. They see themselves as alienated from themselves and from life because they are now a Christian. So they are saved. And in order to be saved, you have to have unsaved people. It keeps you reactionary. Because the Christian is going to be reacting to life because they see themselves as separate as a born-again, saved person. And so life is something that you overcome. Life is something that you take on. It is a task that is to be mastered. And the Christian spends their life attempting to master the task, which is be sinless as you possibly can in this sin-filled, fallen world. You see? Conflict. The base psychology in Christianity is conflict. Often you've heard me say that then the Christian has to resort to peace at any price. And the reason why I say that is, it's peace at any price because the Christian knows. They know the world is fallen and they know they're a sinner. And so in order to find peace, they have to engage this very inappropriate psychology as I've just laid out for you. They have to engage that. And even though I can make perfect sense to you right now, and I can make all this clear to you, the Christian then says, no, well, I can't follow the idea that Chuck is talking about because that would mean that I'm not a sinner and that the world isn't fallen, that Christ didn't have to die on the cross, that there wasn't anything to be saved, I don't need to be saved, and there is no heaven or hell at death. And so therefore the Christian thinks, well, that's not an option, so I'm going to continue to stay in the pattern I'm in, meaning I'm going to be continuing to seek Jesus, seek the Bible and so forth because I can't be trusted. And it's going to work out. In other words, I'm going to find peace through that. In other words, peace at any price. So even though this psychology doesn't make any sense, even though these things are true, even though I'm addicted to porn, even though I'm having affairs, even though I can't stop drinking, even though I can't stop cheating on my taxes, I'm going to keep doing this same behavior. Peace at any price. Because the only way I can find peace, the Christian is saying this, the only way I can find peace is if I behave in these certain ways that my pastor has outlined for me, that the Bible has outlined for me. So it doesn't matter that it doesn't make any psychological sense. That doesn't matter. Peace at any price. This is the only way that it works. And this is how the self-righteousness inside the Christian works against them. That self-righteous, indignant approach to life keeps you locked down in this insane approach, which is, if I keep doing the same thing over and over again, it's going to change. The situation is going to change and I'm going to get better. And we all know that's pure insanity. That's the definition of insanity. And that's why I started all of these talks with, at the moment a person admits to being a sinner and subscribes to the belief system, you're trapped right there. A bond forms, a trauma bond forms with the religion itself. And I've talked about this before. It's a Stockholm syndrome, and you can look that up. But this Stockholm syndrome trauma bond forms inside the person because they can't escape themselves, and they're a sinner. And it's just like being in an abusive relationship and you can't escape the abuser. Let's say like you're a 10-year-old child and your parents abuse you. You can't escape. And the Christian is in the same place, except the abuser is themselves. And this is what's so hard to see when you're Christian. The abuser is yourself. That's why I said when I started this thing that you're complicit. You are complicit in the abuse in that you are demanding that you're a sinner. And so that's why this whole life philosophy has to shift if a person is ever going to have any hope of overcoming things like addiction. It's the heart that's going to provide the motivation for true change. And if the Christian sees their heart as sinful, they're going to continue to be a sinner. And that's why they keep persisting in the behavior, even though they're praying, even though they ask for a hedge of protection, even though they got Bible verses memorized, they still persist in the behavior because they're seeking outside themselves for resolution. And it's never going to happen because the secondary action, the person never has the ball. In the secondary action, the person never has the ball. They are in a secondary reactive mode. And so they're dependent and needy. Because it's not in themselves. They have to have it come from outside themselves. You see? And that's the tragedy. That's why I'm doing all these videos. That's why I'm coming back and I'm doing all this effort and work to try and help this stuff get clarified. I'm doing that because I know what it's like to be in the trap that you're in as a Christian. And I know what it's like to hear this stuff and to hear these Eastern philosophies and everything's one and enlightenment and all these kind of things are so confusing. It's because when I was in that life philosophy, it was unthinkable to consider myself not a sinner. Because just like, well, that's not true. Because I am. That's why I sin. That's why I behave inappropriately, because it's in me. It's like, no. You're just like the abused person who's been told they're ugly by their spouse for, say, 10 years. They believe it. They'll believe that they're ugly, just like the sinner believes that just like the Christian believes they're a sinner. Do you see that? And so therefore, the person is complicit. They're trapped. They're trapped. And they don't realize, that's what's so sad, is that the Christian doesn't realize that they're complicit in the whole thing. They're doing the whole thing. That's why I said in the last talk, I realized I was in a game. And I was the instigator of the game. You see? It takes a tremendous amount of courage to abandon Christianity. And why is that? It takes a tremendous amount of courage to leave the mob. It takes a tremendous amount of courage to tell your abuser, I'm not going to put up with that anymore. And it takes a tremendous amount of courage to say to yourself, I'm not a sinner. I'm not. That's a brain program that's been put into me to control me. And that's why I'm such a control freak and trying to control life, because I think I'm a sinner. I'm empty. And so I have to overcome life. Life is a task to master, like I just said. And it's a setup for failure, because it's peace at any price in Christianity.